Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 2005 remake King Kong. Peter Jackson's King Kong. Now, this is going to be an interesting video. That's all I'm going to say right off the bat, because I'm going to share an opinion that you rarely hear when it comes to this movie. I was not a fan of this film. I didn't hate it. This is not Rant. It's not one of those movies that pissed me off. Well, I mean, the first hour or so, which was excruciatingly boring, that pissed me off. But everything after that, I mean, there were things about it that I genuinely liked. There were some scenes that I loved. There were some things about it that I thought were impressive and noteworthy. It's just one of those movies that, in my opinion, is just an exhausting film to sit through. And it's an exercise in excess. It's excessively long. It's got an excessive amount of characters. It's also excessively boring at times. And what's ironic is that even the action sequences, the scenes that I do like, are also full of excess. The T-Rex fight. One T-Rex isn't enough. We gotta have 4. The Brontosaurus stampede. There's like tons of Brontosauruses. It's not just Brontosauruses. There's these little tiny kind of raptor mini T-Rex like dinosaurs in that sequence as well. The sequence of the insects. There's not just a few of them. There's a whole smorgasbord of them. So even the climax in New York City, everything is excessive. There's almost little to no subtlety in this movie. Now, this movie was a spectacle when it came out. It cost $207 million to make, which was an excessive amount of money for a film production at the time. This is Universal's first King Kong film, but it's not the first one they tried to make. Universal tried to make one called, I think, The Legend of King Kong, and there might have been another name for it. But they were trying to do another King Kong film around the same time in the 1976 remake, but something happened, and I'll talk more about that later. Because I'm planning on rounding up all of these Kong reviews with an episode of The Never Were's on King Kong films that were never made. Now, this movie, of course, eventually got greenlit because Peter Jackson became a huge success and a critical darling after the Lord of the Rings films. And King Kong is not a Lord of the Rings epic. And it shows. This film is drawn out way too much. This film had no reason being 3 hours and 8 fucking minutes. This movie is 3 hours long. It's too fucking long. And I can watch 3 hour long stuff if it's a miniseries like Stephen King's It or Salem's Lot. Then that is a reason to be this long, because it's a miniseries. This is a feature film that's 3 hours. The first movie, the original King Kong, is like an hour and 40-something minutes. It has much better pacing, and in my opinion, it's a much better film than this. I also thought the 1976 remake was better, and I'm one of the only people who feels that way. And I actually think that film captured the spirit of Kong better than this, because this tried to make Kong too sympathetic, in my opinion. And also, a lot of the stuff that it does, you could see done in the 1933 film with a little bit more authentic and genuine spirit and heart. The heart in this, to me personally, felt artificial. And I think it's because it was so saccharine sweet that it just came across as the writers and the director just trying way too hard to make this a heartwarming movie. But at the same time have these horrific sequences of violence where this guy gets eaten headfirst by a worm. But, you know, I mean, the original King Kong had that too, because King Kong was a straight-up savage. So, yeah, this film came out in 2005. I remember the whole hype for it. And I didn't really buy into it then, and I never even saw the film in the theater. I just, my parents and I were just like, we took one look at the running time and we're like, nope, no, not doing that. And we saw it on home video one time, and that was the last time I saw this movie, and that was a decade ago, or even longer than that. Yeah, over a decade. And the thing I remember the most is the scene with the insects and the worms, and I remember my mom being freaked out by it and thought it was disgusting and wrong, and I thought it was cool. That's all I remember. That's all I remembered about this movie for the longest time, was just that scene. That's how much of an impression it left on me, even at a young age. So, got around to watching it again, sat down, I finished off half a peanut butter and bacon hamburger that I had left over from a bar and grill, had some tater tots, grabbed my Mellow Yellow, sat down and watched this film. And I honestly had to take a few breaks because it was just excessively long. It was way too goddamn long. And the first hour was excruciating to sit through. It's full of all this character build-up and development for characters that, in my opinion, there's too many of them in this movie. There's too many characters. There's too many fucking characters in this movie. You have Anne, you have Carl Denham, you have Jack Driscoll, but then you also have new people. You have more character development. You have character development for the captain, which isn't necessary. You have Colin Hanks as character Preston. You have Jamie Bell, who plays some cabin boy named Jimmy. Andy Serkis, of course, who played Kong. Evan Parke plays a first mate. You have Kyle Chandler, who plays an actor who specializes in adventure movies, who was just thrown into this film and is not even a part of the original. You had, all these just a lot of just characters that for me were just too many of them. You had Craig Hall plays Mike, who happens to be the sound guy, who happens to be the first guy to die, which honestly, that's fitting, because I felt like I was dying while I was watching this excruciatingly, painfully dull and boring first hour and 5 or 10 minutes or so of the movie. So yeah, I'm really, it was just an excessively long and boring film at times. But there is potential. That's what's so frustrating about it. It's like, once it finally gets going, it's actually pretty fun. But it just takes too long to get going, so I've already lost too much investment in the movie by that point. So the film was directed by Peter Jackson, and I honestly think this is one of his weakest films. I really do. I will take Dead Alive over this any day. The Frighteners, Meet the Feebles, Bad Taste. I will take any of those films over King Kong. I wish he did films like that again. I miss that Peter Jackson. I miss the Peter Jackson who was creative, wild, and crazy, and created films that were on par with the insanity of something that Frank Henenlotter would come up with. I miss that Peter Jackson dearly. I'm sick and tired of this epic Peter Jackson, who as soon as he did Lord of the Rings, that's all he ever did, was some variation of a Lord of the Rings type movie. King Kong is his version of a Lord of the Rings type epic for the King Kong story. The problem is, the film never had a story that was in-depth enough, or big enough, or grand enough, or detailed enough to be a Lord of the Rings epic. His direction in this also, I thought at times, was either flat or rudderless, because it's all over the place. There are some shots that are absolutely breathtaking. There are other shots that don't really look that great. His overuse of slow-mo and this weird thing where he'd crank the camera up and then slow the film down, which he used way too often in this film, really did not work at all for me. In fact, it took me out of every scene that it was used in. And it just, I don't know, there were times where it felt like it was just heartless because it was such a film where it was just shot with a computer. There's just all this digital stuff, and there really wasn't a lot of real people. I mean, there were actors, real people, but what I'm talking about is like the backgrounds were all CG, Kong was CG, and then there was like this filter that was added on everything. So it's just there's this kind of disconnect, and it's especially evident in the scenes where the ship is trying to head off, and the Venture is heading off to Skull Island when it's heading out of New York. The Venture itself is a completely CGI boat, and it does not look good in 2017, in my opinion. It looks horribly dated in terms of the CGI. The attempts at trying to make it all cloudy and foggy just come across as looking murky and muddy and just ugly looking. So, I mean, there's certain shots in this film that are absolutely gorgeous. There's other shots where it looks kind of ugly, to be perfectly honest. I think he's trying to add some kind of sepia tone or something to certain scenes because he's trying to make it look like more of a film at the time, which I get it, but at the same time, it just doesn't really work for me. The film is based on the screenplay by Marion C. Cooper and Edgar Wallace. It even name drops the two. In what is it's an attempt to be a nice homage to the original, but to me it just felt forced, and it was just like, so they're making a King Kong movie within a King Kong film? That doesn't make any sense. Or they're not, it's just, oh, Marion C. Cooper's doing another film. He got that actress you wanted, Fay Wray. And there's other things too, like he said, giant apes are for B movies or something. It's, you know, nudies, we're not making a B movie or something. Titties are for B movies or something. And I'm just like, B movies? Like, B movie wasn't even a term, in my opinion, that even existed in the 1930s. That was a term that started in the 50s, if I remember correctly. And always talk about monster movies or B pictures. My monster movies are B pictures. What are you talking about, screenwriters? This is 1933. This is the time of the Universal monster movies. They weren't considered B movies. Those were films that were considered to be big films. In fact, Universal, in a lot of ways, was founded and built off of Universal monster movies, like Frankenstein and Dracula. So, or Bride of Frankenstein. So, which I don't get that at all. That particular line just rubbed me the wrong way. And what are you saying? You're saying, oh, the film itself is saying, oh, monster films are B pictures, and you're making a monster movie. And there's even another line of dialogue that came across as extremely pretentious for me. So you had the first mate who's talking to Jimmy. He's talking about this book that he stole from the library. And Jimmy's all like, he tells him what the story's really about. And he's all like, and Jimmy's like, so it's not an adventure. He's like, no, it isn't. And I'm like, yeah, so just like this film isn't very adventurous for the first hour. 10 minutes for the most part. I keep harping on that because that is a crippling flaw this film has. The script by Fran Walsh, Philippa Bowens, and Peter Jackson, in my opinion, it needed another rewrite. It needed to cut out a lot of the stuff in the beginning. I understand they're trying to have character building. I get it. But it's not interesting. It isn't interesting to me. It just feels excessive. And it stretches the film out way too much. You can have character building moments, that's fine, but you don't need to have an hour of that for a film that's 3 hours, especially for a movie called King Kong. People are paying to see Kong. They don't want to see some vaudeville act and Peter Jackson's love letter to the 30s. That's really not what people want to see. At least that's not what I wanted to see. Both versions, previous versions of King Kong got it right. They had a little bit of character stuff. You got to know the characters just enough before they went on their voyage. They went on the voyage. They were already on the island 30 minutes into the movie. Both the 1933 film and the 1976 remake both had Kong both had the people arrive on, the crew of the Venture or the Petrox Explorer arrive on the island 30 minutes into the movie. Not over an hour into the film. And if the stuff that was going on in the hour before was interesting to me, then it wouldn't bother me so much. But it isn't. I also felt, there were too many characters. The cabin boy and his mentor could have been cut completely out of the film. At least most of their scenes could have been. The stuff with... there's just always different other characters that were either just there to be cannon fodder or were just... in my opinion, just rather useless. The Bruce guy, why did you need that guy? He's an asshole. Is that the point? He's an asshole. Whatever. Kyle Chandler didn't need to be in the movie. Adrien Brody felt like he was completely unnecessary because of Kyle Chandler's presence. Why is Kyle Chandler... There's even a line of dialogue where he says almost the exact same line that the actor who played Jack said in the 1933 original. So it's like, what is the point of these two characters? It's like you have two of these male leads and neither of them are given enough screen time, so neither of them have that much to do, let alone make that much of an impact. And the scenes where they try to set up the love story with Naomi Watts and Adrien Brody, they don't work for me because it just seems rushed, or the film is just so bloated and has all this shit going on that the love story just feels like it's not even secondary. It feels like it's way, way, way down the line. And it doesn't help either that these two actors, in my opinion, have absolutely zero chemistry with one another. They have no chemistry at all. So the love story comes across as completely inauthentic. And honestly, Naomi Watts seems like she, especially the way the script is written, it seems like she's more in love with Kong than she is with Jack. I mean, there were so many scenes with Kong with Naomi Watts looking up at him all googly-eyed and talking to, doing her vaudeville act and juggling for his amusement and pratfalling for his amusement. The whole scene where Kong's butt sliding on the ice and she's all like fawning over him. It was like one of those things that's like, I was expecting her to, in 2 seconds flat, kiss Kong straight on the lips and then get prepared for some sweet monkey loving. Because there's just so much excess with the stuff with her bonding with Kong. And it was just ridiculous, in my opinion. And it didn't come across as authentic to me. You have Colin Hanks' character. You got, Jamie Bell, who, what was the whole point of that character? Who cares? They even brought back Choi, who was this kind of racist stereotype from the 1933 film. And he's back in here, and it's even more cringe-inducing to watch because it's a 2005 film. And you have this actor named Lobo Chan, who's just doing an Asian stereotype in a 2005 movie. And the savages in this, to me, they honestly felt like they were more savage than they were in the 1933 film. Here they look like they're orcs from Lord of the Rings. They got sharp teeth. So they have white eyes. It was just weird. And they're killing people, which is something you never saw in the 1933 film. And yeah, you could say that was kind of racist as well, but it wasn't nearly as bad as this one, in my opinion. Like, this film was twice as tone deaf when it comes to the natives than the 1933 movie. Then you had, like, the captain guy, who, in my opinion, Thomas Krestchmann was a shitty actor in this. He delivered a shitty performance. He's a wannabe Jurgen Prochnow. And it just, why did he have so many scenes? It's just a lot of questions. I have so many questions when it comes to the script. Stuff needed to be trimmed. Stuff needed to be cut out of the film. If the movie had like 30 minutes of backstory and build-up, and then they get on Skull Island, and then you have the Brontosaurus stampede. I mean, actually before that, of course you're going to have the whole stuff with the girl getting taken So you have the stuff with the girl getting taken, and then you have stuff like the Brontosaurus stampede. Then you have stuff with Kong and with Naomi Watts, but I toned down the whole vaudeville. I just thought it was silly. And, I mean, I'm sorry, it's not heartwarming or endearing to me to see Naomi Watts goofily juggling in front of King Kong while he's going, ah, 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 ah. Glad Kong is having a good time, because I'm not, because I'm shaking my head in disbelief. You cut down on that. You have the Brontosaurus scene, you have the T-Rex sequence, you have the stuff with the bugs, and then Kong gets captured and gets taken to New York City. He breaks out. You cut out the butt sliding on the ice scene that looks like an outtake from the Ice Follies. And you also make it so the climax with Kong and the Empire State Building doesn't feel as drawn out as it is, because it really does. Oh, he gets through the first wave of planes. Here's a second wave of planes. Which might have been how it was in the original, but it just comes across as excessive to me. Much like everything in this movie, even the stuff that I like. This is definitely one of those reviews where it does have a lot of ranting, but I don't want to call it a rant because I'm not like, oh, this movie sucks. It's just like, don't think it's that great of a film. So, yeah, you switch those things up with the script, I think the film would be immensely better. I'd actually like the movie if it was tighter paced, it cut out some of the sappy, over melodramatic aspects of the film. And if you actually bothered to write these characters with any charisma. These characters have a bunch of character development, but they have no charisma. I don't like any of these characters. The only one that I think is tolerable is Naomi Watts, but I still think she's okay. I'm not enamored with her. I don't think she's phenomenal or anything. I just think she's there. Everyone else, in my opinion, is either miscast or has nothing to do, or whatever they do, I don't really give a shit about. Because the film never bothered to really make me care for these characters that much. They have backstory, but they don't have any charisma. So none of the backstory doesn't matter to me if you have these bland actors playing these bland characters. Jack Black is horribly miscast as Carl Denham. He was not ready for this type of role in 2005, and it shows. His performance is an absolute train wreck. He's overacting. He's trying to overcompensate in every scene he's in. He's trying to prove that he can be a serious dramatic actor, and he's falling flat on his ass. They would have been better off if they had him be more of a comedic character, because that's really who Jack Black is. But they instead try to make this character more of a straight character, and also they added too much character development with some of these characters. For example, with Jack Black's character, Carl Denham, instead of him being a successful Hollywood guy, he's a guy who's had moderate success, and he's a risk. And he illegally gets on board the ship and goes to Skull Island. I'm just like, why do we need that extra bit? That's unnecessary. So, I mean, there's just unnecessary bits of drama that are added to the film. The whole backstory with Anne, where you find out she's a vaudeville actress, and she's struggling for work, and okay, take or leave it, but whatever, alright. And they recreate the whole scene where she tries to steal an apple, and Carl sees her as the perfect gal for his movie. Yeah, Adrien Brody's character, Jack, he's a scriptwriter now. He's not a guy who was just on the crew of the ship. And I prefer the Jack from the 1933 film, or Jack Prescott from the 1976 remake. Definitely prefer Jeff Bridges over Adrien Brody. Brody's out of his league here too. What? I'm supposed to buy that he's some guy who's gonna save Anne from Kong? I don't buy it. I don't buy Adrien Big Nose Brody in this role. And these other characters add nothing to me, nothing for me. So it's just, I understand Kyle Chandler was there as comedic relief and as like a satire, but he just didn't work for me, and he was just a dick. And his scenes were pointless. He took scenes away from Adrien Brody. And yeah, Adrien Brody probably would not have really done that great of a job as this action hero guy, but at least he would have had more scenes. He's supposed to be one of the big stars, and it seems like he's barely even in the movie. So the cast is got some talented people, but they're not given as much to do character-wise. I mean, they have character building moments, but once that happens, there's not a lot. But to be honest, there are things about this that really work. The Brontosaurus Stampede is a really fun sequence. The T-Rex fight with Kong was really cool. I thought it was inventive and creative and showed me why I like Peter Jackson as a director. The stuff with the spiders and the scorpions and the worms, that was something straight out of a nightmare, and it was really effective. The sequences when Kong escapes in the theater and tears it apart and goes in and rampages through New York City, the little chase that Adrien Brody has with Kong, that was effective. There were moments, some of the scenes where Kong's on top of the Empire State Building and knocking planes around was effective. There are things about this film that really do work. There were pieces of James Newton Howard's score that I really did like. I thought they were very poignant. And most of them happened during the last 30 minutes of the movie. The other stuff before that, though, felt stock and generic in terms of the music, and didn't really add that much to the film for me, and honestly wasn't really much of anything. So the score has its moments, but overall it's also disappointing. The cinematography by Andrew Lesnie is absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful at times. There are certain shots with Kong and Anne that are works of art. You could put them on a wall in a gallery and they would look right at home. There's other shots that, like I said, look kind of muddy, or there's all this stuff going on, so there really isn't a lot of time to really get the most out of the shot. The production design, I thought, was pretty impressive for the most part. The way that they created the look of the 1930s New York City, the look of the city. They did a great job with the costume design. They had nice costumes for the time period. I did not really care for the look of Skull Island. I thought it was excessive. That's a common theme, a common thread throughout this review and throughout the film for me, is just excess. When they get on the boat and the rowboat and they're rowing onto Skull Island, there's rocks jutting out of the ground that have faces on them. That's unnecessary. That's what I'm talking about in terms of excess. We don't need to have rocks near the island have scary faces on them. That's just not needed. The natives don't need to be cannibals from Cannibal Holocaust. That's not necessary. The whole thing where they tie up a maiden to sacrifice her to Kong. You don't need it to be this giant elaborate thing with a CGI lava waterfall in the background. You don't need that. I mean, it's just like less is more. It really is. There's such a thing as too much, and this film is too much for the majority of the running time. But it does have its moments. Once they get past all the native stuff and Kong takes Anne and the crew, they get on Skull Island looking for her and encounter the dinosaurs and stuff like that. It's actually on par with something like Jurassic Park for me. That portion of the film. I just wish the rest of the film was as good and as consistently thrilling and exciting and as entertaining as that part of the film was for me. So, yeah, it's one of those movies that I'm very divided on. There are things about it that I love, there's things about it that I don't. And I seem to be kind of in the minority on this. This is a movie that has a huge fan base, a 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb, and 83% Rotten Tomatoes, and that's fine. I have no issue with that whatsoever, and I think that's wonderful, and I think that's great. I just personally don't feel the same way. I respectfully disagree with the majority when it comes to this movie. I think this is an overlong, excessive movie that has some genuinely good sequences that I like and I enjoy, and some elements about it that really do work. But there's also a lot of things that, in my opinion, do not work at all. And they really bring the film down. I mean, even Kong's demise, even his death in this, it like I said earlier, it feels drawn out, and it also doesn't have that much impact. It's a PG-13 film, so Kong looks like he doesn't even have a scratch on him when he falls off the Empire State Building to his death. He's being pumped full of bullets from these planes, and it doesn't even look like he has a single scratch on him. The 1976 remake, which gets shit on by so many people, has a much more effective climax and a much more effective demise for Kong, because in that film, Kong is getting hit by a minigun on these helicopters, and the bullets are hitting him, and there's blood squibs popping off, and he's just bleeding like crazy. He's profusely bleeding everywhere. And I'm like, that's an absolutely horrifying image, and it's just an image that has stuck with me ever since I saw the film as a kid. That is the most, like I said earlier in that review, I think that's the most effective death scene for a Kong film. This just feels like, oh, it's shot beautifully, it's got some nice cinematography, but it just feels excessive. And it also doesn't have the same amount of impact because it's PG-13. We can't show Kong have a single scratch on him. So it looks like he's fine, and he just like has a heart attack or something and falls off the building. Or the bullets didn't really do anything to him. He just died of a broken heart or some lame shit like that. So yeah, it's just, I mean, there's cool things about this, like that, the T-Rex fight, but there just isn't enough of it for me. So, I don't know what else to say about Peter Jackson's King Kong. I've blabbed your ear off long enough, except if I was to rate out of 5 stars, give my rating for the film, and I'd give it 2 out of 5. I know, it's not a very high rating, but I don't think it's a very good movie. I think it has some great things about it, and I know I sound like a broken record when I'm saying that, but I mean it. That's why it's a review and not really a straight up rant. Maybe I'll have review and rant, because there is a lot of ranting in this video, as you've seen. It's just, I just wish the whole film was as good and as thrilling, as much fun as this stuff on Skull Island. And it just isn't. And in my opinion, the next Kong film, the most recent Kong film, Kong Skull Island, absolutely wipes the fucking floor with this movie. So anyway, stay tuned for that review, because that's coming up next. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys later. See ya.